Halloween. The one night the veil thins, and some things make it through. Every year the archive grows a little louder. New voices, new recordings, strange fragments that were never meant to be heard. These are the ones that slipped across this time.
I've always loved Halloween. Not for the scares exactly, but for the way it changes the world for one night. Ordinary houses glow with jack-o'-lanterns, porches creak under fake coffins and cobwebs, and people who normally barely nod hello suddenly dress like zombies and laugh like maniacs. It's the one time of year where everyone seems willing to play. So when my friend messaged me about a house party, I didn't need much convincing. By the time I walked up their street, I could already hear the bass thumping from halfway down the block. The house itself was lit up like something out of a theme park. Orange spotlights washed the walls, purple strobes flashed from the upstairs windows, and a fog machine pumped thick clouds across the lawn. Glow-in-the-dark skeleton hands clawed their way out of the flower beds, and an animatronic witch kept cackling by the porch, motion-activated every time someone walked past. I grinned like a kid. They'd gone all out. Inside, the living room looked like a dollar store horror movie had exploded in the best way possible. Fake cobwebs stretched across every corner, strung with little LED spiders that blinked red when you got too close. A life-size plastic Grim Reaper stood guard by the fireplace, scythe gleaming under a blacklight. Someone had even rigged up a projection of ghosts floating across the wall, drifting in and out of the fake brick wallpaper. The kitchen was where the real magic was happening. Bowls of neon-colored Jell-O shots lined the counters like glowing gemstones, and someone had filled a plastic cauldron with dry ice so that every ladle of punch rose up in a bubbling white mist. The drinks had names scrawled on sticky notes, things like Zombie Juice, Blood Moon, and Witch's Brew. I grabbed a red Solo cup labeled Graveyard Smash and took a sip. It tasted like sugar, rum, and something sour that burned just enough to feel dangerous. Perfect. Even the food had been given the Halloween treatment. Plates of cookies shaped like bats, hot dogs wrapped in pastry like tiny mummies, cupcakes topped with plastic spiders. It was cheesy, ridiculous, and completely brilliant. For a moment, I just stood there, drink in hand, taking it all in. The laughter, the flashing lights, the way the smoke machine outside drifted through the open door and mingled with the scent of pumpkin candles. Yeah, this was exactly how Halloween should feel. I found my friends sprawled across a couch in the living room, shouting over the music and pretending their glow sticks were lightsabers. One of them spotted me and waved so hard their plastic axe nearly took out the person beside them. "Finally!" they yelled. "You took your time!" I squeezed in between them, dodging a crooked witch's hat and a vampire whose fake fangs were already sliding out of place. Someone shoved a cup into my hand and we clinked it against a plate of cookies shaped like tombstones before downing the contents. It was exactly the kind of chaos I'd hoped for. Cheap decorations, bad drinks, and friends already tipsy enough to laugh at anything. I even got roasted for my half-assed costume, which they claimed was generic horror movie extra at best. I leaned back, taking it all in. Between the fog machine, the strobe lights, and the projections of ghosts drifting across the wall, the whole house felt like it had been swallowed by Halloween. And then I noticed it. In the corner of the room, near the fireplace, stood another figure. For a second, I thought it was just another decoration. Like the Grim Reaper statue propped up by the window, a tall black robe, hood pulled low, a plain white face staring out. It fit so perfectly with the theme that I didn't give it a second thought. I figured someone had gone all out and set up another life-sized prop. But then someone stumbled past it, brushing against the robe. And the thing shifted. Not much, just the smallest tilt of the head, the faintest step back into the shadows. I blinked. My stomach gave a little lurch. That wasn't a decoration. My friends shoved a shot glass into my hand, glowing an unhealthy green. I downed it, wincing at the sugar burn, and turned back to point out the figure. But the corner was empty. No robe, no mask, nothing at all. Had someone moved it? Or had it never been a decoration in the first place? I lost track of time after that. The party blurred into a carousel of bad music, cheap drinks, and friends daring each other to eat suspiciously slimy Jell-O shots. Every so often, I'd glance around the room, half expecting to see that robed figure propped back in the corner. It was easier to believe it had just been a prop, moved when people needed space. That made sense. Except I kept seeing it again. Not always in the same place, but always at the edge of things. By the back door when I went outside for air. In the hallway as I squeezed past a couple making out against the wall. At the top of the stairs, visible for just a second before someone stumbled in front of me. Each time, I told myself it was just my imagination. A trick of the lights, the fog, too much sugar and vodka. Until I noticed the mask. At first, it had been blank, smooth porcelain, expressionless. But when I spotted it again, standing half hidden in the kitchen doorway, something had changed. A smile. Painted across the face. Wide, thin, and just a little too sharp. I froze, drink halfway to my mouth. My skin prickled. Someone crashed into me from behind, laughing, and when I turned back, the mask was blank again. No smile, just white porcelain. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to. Because part of me was terrified I'd look crazy if I tried to explain it. But I knew what I'd seen, and that mask had definitely changed. I tried to ignore it, tell myself I was imagining things. A party like this, with all the smoke, the lights, the booze, of course I'd see weird stuff in the corner of my eye. But the figure kept showing up, by the drinks table, near the bathroom door. At one point, standing directly behind a group playing beer pong like it was just another guest waiting their turn. No one else even looked at it. And the mask was never the same twice. When I ducked into the hallway to grab my phone from my coat, the figure was there, hood low, mask smooth except for 2 dark smudges where the eyes should be. Not holes, just black stains bleeding across the porcelain. Later, in the crowd, I caught sight of it again. This time the mask had no eyes at all, just empty, smooth skin where they should have been. And once, I swear I'll never forget it, I turned toward the kitchen and saw the mask stretched into a grin so wide it nearly split the face in 2. Painted teeth, jagged and wrong, glimmering in the strobe light. Every time I blinked, it shifted back, smooth and blank again. But I knew what I'd seen. At one point, I grabbed my friend by the arm, tried to point it out. Right there, in the robe, do you see them? She squinted into the crowd, then laughed. You've had too much zombie juice. There's nothing there. When I turned back, the figure was gone. For a while, I started to wonder if she was right. Maybe I really was imagining it. Maybe it was just my brain stitching random shadows into shapes. But then the party host jumped onto a chair and clapped their hands for attention. "Who's ready for the scare maze?" they shouted. The room erupted into cheers. People started shoving toward the garage, laughing, already bracing for jump scares and cheap tricks. And through the crowd, just before the lights dimmed, I saw it again. The robed figure, waiting by the garage door. mask painted with a stitched-up mouth. And this time, it was staring directly at me. The garage door rattled open and a wave of cool air spilled out, tinged with smoke machine haze. Inside, they'd hung black sheets from the ceiling to form narrow corridors, the fabric swaying as people brushed past. A strobe light pulsed somewhere deeper in, and I could hear cheap Halloween sound effects, screams, rattling chains, the low growl of some fake monster. Everyone was buzzing with nervous laughter, daring each other to go first. I ended up somewhere in the middle of the line, hemmed in on all sides. At first, it was exactly what you'd expect. Someone leapt out wearing a rubber werewolf mask. A sheet ghost wobbled across the floor. We screamed, laughed, shoved each other forward. Typical party scare stuff. But the deeper we went, the stranger it felt. The corridors narrowed, the sheets brushing my arms no matter how close I pulled them in. The fog grew thicker, catching in my throat. The strobe light flickered faster, cutting everything into sharp, jerky snapshots. And then, it changed. The corridor seemed to stretch on, impossibly long, further than the garage could ever hold. The strobe snapped off, replaced by a dim, suffocating red glow that seemed to bleed through the fabric walls. All the canned screams and laughter vanished. The only sound left was the pounding of my heartbeat in my ears. And at the very end of the corridor, it stood, waiting. The robed figure, mask glowing white in the crimson haze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. A shiver crawled over my skin, sharp and skittering like spiders racing across my arms and spine. The fog thickened, rolling low along the floor, then rising to waist height, its edges glowing with the red light until it looked like the whole corridor was flooding with blood. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but my body betrayed me. My muscles wouldn't respond. My legs felt carved from stone. I was stuck, frozen. The figure didn't move, didn't tilt its head, didn't take a step. It just stood there, waiting. The silence pressed down until it felt like the whole world had shrunk to the thundering of my heart. Then suddenly something slammed into my back, one of my friends shoving me forward, laughing, yelling for me to keep going. And just like that, the sound effects rushed back in. The red glow blinked into harsh strobe flashes. The corridor was narrow again, sheets brushing my arms, people all around me. But the figure was still there. For one flash, it was expressionless. The next, it had no eyes. The next, its mouth was stretched into that painted grin again. I couldn't tell if it was moving closer or if the corridor itself was bending around me. Each burst of light carved the world into pieces, and in every piece, it was waiting, watching. I shoved forward, desperate to get away from it. The sheets clawed at my arms, clinging like wet skin, and I stumbled against the person ahead of me. They shrieked, laughed, shoved me back like it was all part of the game. I fought my way through, heart hammering so loud it drowned out the canned screams. My lungs felt raw, my throat tight with smoke and fear. Every step was a battle, like the maze itself didn't want to let me go, and then, finally, the fabric walls parted. I burst out into the open space of the garage exit, nearly falling to my knees as I gulped down the cold night air seeping in from the half-open door. My friends tumbled out behind me, doubled over with laughter, swearing it was the best thing they'd ever seen. "Did you see her face?" one of them howled. "She nearly pissed herself." They nudged me, grinning, waiting for me to laugh along. But my throat was too dry, my skin still crawling with that spider leg shiver. "I'm telling you," I managed, voice thin, that wasn't part of it. That wasn't a prop. The host overheard and turned, still grinning. What wasn't? The Reaper costume? Nah, don't give me that credit. I just rigged up some sheets and borrowed a couple masks. The rest was you lot scaring yourselves. More laughter, heads nodding, everyone agreeing. I tried to force a smile, but my chest felt like it was full of ice water, because I knew what I'd seen. The robe, the mask, and the way it had been waiting for me. Even now, standing outside in the cool night, I couldn't shake the feeling it was still there, somewhere behind me, in the shadows, watching. I couldn't relax after that. No matter how much I tried to laugh along, to sip at another drink, to pretend the maze had just rattled me more than I wanted to admit, the feeling stuck with me. That crawling unease, like a set of eyes were pressing into my back no matter where I stood. The music felt too loud, the strobe lights too sharp. Every gust from the smoke machine made me flinch. My friends were still in high spirits, already planning another round of games, someone queuing up the next playlist. They teased me a little more, said I'd be telling ghost stories about that maze for years. But their voices blurred together, distant and muffled, like I was hearing them from the bottom of a well. I told them I was calling it early, blamed it on the drinks, blamed it on an early start tomorrow. They groaned, tried to drag me into staying, but I was already grabbing my jacket from the heap by the stairs. The air outside was sharp and cold. It hit my lungs like water after drowning. For a moment, I just stood there on the porch, letting the night soak into me. Behind me, the party thumped on, laughter spilling out, the witch by the door cackling every time someone passed the motion sensor. But out here it was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every leaf scuttling across the pavement sound like footsteps. I pulled my jacket tighter and started walking. The further I got from the house, the lighter I should have felt. But each step down the street only tightened the knot in my chest, like something was still following me. The streets were nearly empty, most of the trick-or-treaters long gone. Only the wind kept me company, sweeping down the pavement in sharp gusts that sent dead leaves scuttling across the ground. Each rush of them sounded like footsteps, quick, skittering, right behind me. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but there was never anyone there. Just the leaves, tumbling and scattering like they were chasing me. Every few houses, motion sensor decorations broke the silence. A skeleton lunged from a porch with a mechanical groan. A fake bat dropped from a tree and swung wildly on its string. The sudden noises made me jolt each time, heart hammering, before I realized they were only plastic. But even plastic things cast shadows. One long-legged inflatable spider swayed in the wind, its silhouette stretching across the sidewalk. For a second it looked exactly like the black sheets of the maze, billowing, reaching. And I had to force myself to keep walking, to keep breathing. Somewhere a ghost decoration flapped and snapped in the wind. Its loose white fabric whipped around itself, tangling and twisting, until I could swear it was the same suffocating cloth that had brushed my arms in the dark corridor. I pulled my jacket tighter and tried to tell myself it was all in my head. Just props, just decorations, just the aftertaste of fear clinging to me from the maze. But the further I walked, the stronger the feeling grew, that I wasn't really alone out here. I turned the corner onto my street, relief washing through me at the sight of the familiar row of houses. Just a few more minutes and I'd be inside, lights on, door locked. That's when I saw it. At the far end of the road, beneath a flickering street lamp, stood the robed figure. The hood hung low, the long black fabric stirring in the wind. The mask gleamed pale under the yellow light, but this time it was worse than ever. The face wasn't blank. It wasn't smiling. It wasn't stitched. It was twisted. Features stretched too far, eyes sunken black, mouth pulled open in a silent scream that seemed to go on forever. A face made to burn itself into memory, something no human could wear. I froze, every muscle locking tight. The street lamp buzzed and the shadows around it began to stretch, bleeding outward, reaching for me. The night seemed to lean closer, pressing down. My chest burned, my legs trembled. And then I moved. I turned and ran, past the rustling leaves, past the flapping decorations, past the empty houses with their grinning pumpkins. I ran and ran until my lungs screamed for air, and sometimes, even now, I wonder if I ever really stopped, or if I'm still running.
I'd been looking forward to Halloween all week. Not for candy, not for costumes, but for this. Every year, our group picked somewhere creepy to explore. An old factory, the woods by the quarry, once even the boarded-up house on Briar Lane. This year, we'd leveled up. The abandoned hospital on the edge of town. It had been sitting empty for decades, people said. The windows smashed, the roof sagging in places, the old brickwork crawling with ivy. No one had gone near it in years, at least not officially, which meant it was perfect. I grinned when we pulled up, our headlights sweeping across the crumbling entrance. The emergency sign above the doors was missing a few letters, so it just read Merge Y. The graffiti sprayed across the walls glowed faintly in the streetlight, skulls, obscene doodles, half-faded words. "This is such a bad idea," Danny muttered, pulling her jacket tighter. She was already pale, her breath puffing white in the October chill. "That's the point," I laughed. "You'll scream at a shadow, and I'll have the best night of my life watching you." She shoved me with her elbow, but I caught the twitch at her lips. She was scared, but she was smiling too. That was half the fun. Our friends were already filming on their phones, panning across the broken windows, the spray paint, the weeds growing through the asphalt. Someone was narrating in an exaggerated ghost hunter voice, promising exclusive paranormal content for TikTok. I wasn't scared. Not yet. It was just an old building. And tonight, it was ours. The front doors had been chained shut years ago, but someone had already cut them. The heavy glass panes were cracked like spiderwebs, one hanging loose on its hinge. We squeezed through, our flashlight beams scattering across the lobby. Somehow the building still had electricity. The odd bulb that had managed to survive all these years blinked and glowed with a faint light. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Old dust and mildew, with a sour tang underneath. Danny wrinkled her nose and muttered something about tetanus. I just laughed. The entrance hall was bigger than I'd expected. Half the ceiling tiles were missing, dangling wires swaying slightly as if stirred by our footsteps. The floor was littered with broken tiles and scraps of paper that might once have been hospital forms. A rusted wheelchair sat abandoned by the reception desk, its one good wheel squeaking softly as the air moved. "God, this place is disgusting," Danny whispered, hugging her arms around herself. "Disgusting and amazing," I said, shining my light across a peeling mural of cartoon animals on one wall. A faded giraffe grinned at me through cracks in the paint. "Come on, admit it. This is cool." She jumped when a pigeon burst from the rafters, wings clapping loud enough to echo down the hall. She actually screamed, which sent me into a fit of laughter so hard I doubled over. "Shut up," she hissed, glaring. Her cheeks were red, eyes wide. The others were ahead of us already, their phone flashlights bobbing deeper into the corridor. One of them shouted that they'd found the elevators, and their voices bounced off the empty walls, thin and hollow. The moonlight slipped in through broken windows, silvering the dust motes that swirled in our beams. Every shadow seemed to lean just a little too long, every corner yawning deeper than it should. But I hardly noticed. I was too busy enjoying myself, and enjoying Danny jumping at every sound. We found another ward off to the side. The walls were painted with a mural, faded yellows and greens, cartoon lions and elephants grinning with cracked teeth through the peeling paint. Their eyes had warped where the plaster bubbled, so it looked like they were all staring down at us, too bright and too wide. I laughed under my breath, trying to picture how cheery this place might have looked years ago. See, Danny? Kid-friendly. She wasn't amused. She hugged herself tighter, eyes darting from wall to wall. Then I saw the beds. 6 of them, lined against the wall. Steel frames eaten with rust, mattresses torn open so stuffing spilled like pale guts. The leather straps were still there, cracked and curling, dangling from the rails. That didn't look friendly at all. Danny followed my gaze and swore softly under her breath. What the hell kind of ward was this? I tried to play it off, but a chill crept up my spine. The straps were too real, too intimate. I didn't want to imagine the kids that might have been held down in those beds. Something shifted in the corner, a shape low to the floor, skittering. I yelped before I realized it was only a rat, its eyes flashing red in our beams before it disappeared through a crack in the wall. Danny burst into laughter at my expense, and I felt my cheeks burn. "Shut up," I muttered, but I couldn't help laughing too. Still, when I glanced back at the mural, all those painted animals seemed a little less cheerful. Their cartoon smiles stretched too wide, their cracked eyes following me across the room. I didn't say anything, but for the first time that night, I felt something here I couldn't laugh off. By the time we made it back into the main corridor, the others were already daring each other into side rooms. Their phone flashlights bobbed like fireflies, beams cutting across broken doors and peeling paint. "All right," Jason said, puffing out his chest like he was leading some expedition. "Pairs. We'll cover more ground that way. First to chicken out buys pizza tomorrow." Danny groaned, but she didn't argue. She and I got lumped together, which was fine by me. Watching her freak out was half the fun. The others fanned out down different hallways, their voices fading into echoes. For the first time that night, the hospital felt big. Too big. Our footsteps sounded small against it, swallowed up by corridors that stretched longer than they should. We passed an overturned gurney, one wheel still faintly spinning from where someone had nudged it. The squeak of its rusted axle cut through the silence, shrill and high, before it slowed and stopped. "Creepy," I whispered, grinning. Danny shot me a look. "Not funny." A cough echoed faintly, sudden and wet, from somewhere ahead. We both froze. The beam of my flashlight skimmed across plaster dust, graffiti, a door hanging crooked off its hinges. Nothing moved. "Probably one of the guys," I said, but my voice didn't sound as confident as I wanted it to. We kept walking. Somewhere overhead, a speaker crackled. Faint, like an old PA system trying to come alive. A hiss, a pop, a garbled tone that faded before any words came. Danny clutched my sleeve. "Tell me you heard that." I swallowed, forcing a laugh. Old wiring. This place is falling apart. But the longer we walked, the more the air felt wrong. Stale. Heavy. Each doorway seemed darker than the last, each corridor stretching on just a little further than it should. For the first time, I wasn't sure if splitting up had been such a good idea. Danny's phone pinged as she switched on the camera. "Flashlight's useless," she muttered, "but flash works." The first click blinded us both for a second. Her grin caught mid-eye roll, my mouth open like I was about to say something stupid. She laughed when she showed me. "Perfect, frame it." We took a few more for fun, me slouched in a wheelchair like some deranged patient, her pointing dramatically at a peeling exit sign, both of us grinning nervously but still laughing. Then came another cough. Low, rattling, distant. We froze. The sound seemed to come from the hallway ahead, but when I swung my light, there was nothing but cracked tiles and empty doors. "Echo," I said quickly, though my chest tightened. Click. Danny snapped a photo over my shoulder, aiming down the corridor. She laughed, then faltered. "That's weird." On the screen at the very end of the hallway, the light flare caught something pale. Just a smudge, almost like a blurred face in the dust. I leaned in, heart thumping. "Dust," I said firmly. "Flash glare." That's all she gave me a look, but didn't argue. We kept walking, our footsteps crunching on broken plaster, her phone clenched tighter in her hand. We turned a corner and stumbled into a tiled room. For a second I thought it was a kitchen, until I saw the rows of pipes jutting from the walls, capped with rusted shower heads. The drains in the floor were clogged with debris, long trails of black mold creeping up from the grates. The air was damp here, colder. My light skimmed across a broken mirror, the silver backing peeling, so the reflection looked warped, fractured. "This is worse than the beds," Danny whispered. I tried to laugh, but my voice echoed too sharply off the tiles. It didn't sound like me. Something scuttled overhead, claws on concrete, quick and light. We both jumped as a pigeon burst from a hole in the ceiling, wings thrashing, feathers drifting into the dark. "Jesus Christ!" Danny hissed, clutching her chest. I couldn't help it. I started laughing. "Relax. Just a bird." But then came the cough again, wet, strangled. Not an animal. It echoed down the corridor beyond the showers, rattling faintly like someone trying to clear their lungs underwater. "Pipes," I said automatically, though the word felt thin. Click. Danny's phone flashed again. The photo came up blurred at first, then sharpened, showing a doorway just ahead of us. And in it, something was standing. Not clear, not sharp. Just a tall shadow leaning against the frame, its face pale and featureless, like the light hadn't been able to catch it. Danny's hands trembled as she turned the screen toward me. "That isn't dust." I swallowed, throat dry. Maybe one of the others messing with us. Click. She took another, spinning toward the showers. The picture loaded, showing the rusted pipes, the mold, the warped mirror. And behind us, blurred but unmistakable, another figure. Its limbs long, bent wrong, as though it had been crouched against the wall waiting for the flash. The phone slipped in her hands. That was when the groan rolled through the room. It was low at first, almost like water gurgling in the drains. Then it rose, thick, wet, heavy, like a chest forcing air through ruined lungs. The tiles vibrated with it. My ribs vibrated with it. Danny grabbed my arm, nails digging in. "We need to find the others. Now." We didn't argue about it. We just ran. Our footsteps thundered against the tiles as we bolted from the shower room, the beam of my flashlight jerking wildly over rusted door frames and half-collapsed ceilings. The air seemed thicker now, every breath ragged in my throat. The corridors stretched on, branching in ways I didn't remember. Every turn looked the same. Peeling paint, gurneys with bent wheels, wheelchairs toppled onto their sides like they'd been abandoned mid-flight. "Where are they?" Danny gasped, her voice cracking. Just keep moving." Something clattered behind us, sharp and metallic, like a tray being kicked across the floor. Neither of us looked back. We ducked under a sagging beam, sidestepped a broken bed frame, stumbled around a puddle that stank of rot. Our lights caught glimpses of things that might have been graffiti, or words carved into the walls. They blurred as we ran past. Then came another cough. Closer this time, just around the bend. Danny yanked me left down another corridor. My shoulder slammed against the wall, paint flaking under my grip as we pushed on. For a few heartbeats her light bobbed just ahead of me, then my foot caught on something. A broken crutch, half buried in plaster dust. I went sprawling, palms slamming into the grit, flashlight clattering away. The beam spun crazily across the ceiling, catching a wheelchair in its sweep. One wheel still gently turning as if something had just moved it. "Danny!" My shout tore from my throat, echoing down the corridor, but her light had vanished. Only my beam trembling across the tiles. The groan came then. Deep, wet, dragging. It rattled in the pipes overhead, rolled along the walls, and sank into my ribs. I snatched up my flashlight, sweeping it in every direction. Doorways gaped open like mouths. The shadows seemed thicker, reaching closer, My own breath rasped loud in my ears. For a few heartbeats, I was certain I was alone. Then a shape burst into my light, Danny barreling back down the corridor, eyes wide with panic. She skidded to a stop, grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "Don't stop," she panted. "Just go." So, we ran again, the sound of coughing and groaning chasing us through the twisting halls. The corridors finally spat us into a wide room, and we skidded to a halt. It had once been an operating theater. You could still see the shape of it, even under decades of dust and rot. Rusted tables stood at crooked angles, wheels locked in place by grime. Overhead lights dangled from broken mounts, long shadows stretching across the walls like reaching fingers. The floor was sticky with stains that time hadn't erased, dark patches that trailed toward the drains in the center. I didn't want to guess what they had been. Danny gagged softly, hand pressed to her mouth. My flashlight caught a row of cabinets along one wall, glass shattered, the contents long since pilfered. Bandage rolls yellowed to parchment. A single rubber mask, the kind they used for anesthetic, dangling from a cracked hose. That was when the air changed. It thickened, heavy as water, pressing down on my chest. The silence grew absolute. Even our breathing sounded muffled, as though we'd stepped underwater. Then, click. Danny's phone flashed. The photo lit the room bright white for a heartbeat. When she lowered it, she froze. Look. On the screen, the operating tables weren't empty. Pale shapes lay sprawled across them, thin, translucent, blurred, but unmistakably human. Arms strapped down, faces turned toward the camera, their mouths open in soundless cries. I whipped my beam back to the tables. Empty, rusted, just as they had been. Click. Another flash. This time, the photo showed figures standing around the tables. Tall, faceless, draped in what looked like surgical gowns eaten away by shadows. Their hands hovered over the empty air, as though still working on invisible patients. And then the sound came. A long, bubbling moan, gurgling through the silence. The pipes shivered with it. The walls seemed to breathe. I stumbled back, shoulder colliding with Danny's. Her phone slipped in her grip, screen glowing pale between us. The last photo still burned on it. And in that photo, we weren't alone. Two blurred figures stood right beside us, close enough their pale arms seemed to brush our shoulders. We ran. There was no plan, no thought, just blind panic driving us out of the theater and back into the maze of corridors. The coughing followed us, rattling through the walls, echoing from every direction at once. Moans groaned low in the pipes. Our lights bounced wildly, catching glimpses of overturned gurneys and broken signs that seemed to loom closer the faster we moved. "There! There!" Danny's voice cracked as she pointed ahead. At the far end of the hall glowed a faint green exit sign, hanging crooked, but still alive. It pulsed through the haze like salvation. We barreled toward it, lungs burning. My beam swept over the walls and froze. The hallway wasn't empty. Figures lined both sides, stretching all the way down, each one draped in a thin hospital sheet, white and stained, shapes of bodies clear beneath. Heads bowed, arms stiff at their sides. Dozens of them, unmoving, like they had been waiting. "Keep going!" Danny screamed, her voice raw. We ran, our footsteps slapping against the tiles. Then, as we drew closer, the sheet stirred. Slowly, like something underneath had taken a long breath. The fabric rose and fell in rhythm. Impossible, but real. One by one, the figures turned. No faces visible, only the folds of cloth shifting. But I could feel them looking. The corridor seemed to stretch with every step, the exit sign no nearer. Then the first sheeted figure sat up straighter. Another twisted at the waist. A third slid one foot onto the floor, the sound of bare skin slapping tile. The whisper started again, Not one voice this time, but dozens. Muffled, smothered under the cloth, rasping in unison, trick or treat. The exit sign flickered, then died, plunging the corridor into absolute dark. And in that blackness, the sheets rustled. Closer all around us. The doors burst open and suddenly we were outside. Cold night air hit me like a wave. Danny stumbled out beside me, both of us gasping, half wild with panic. The others were waiting on the cracked pavement, leaning against the hoods of their cars, phones in hand. Their faces lit up with grins as they saw us. Jason doubled over, laughing. "Holy shit! We got you good." I blinked at him, chest heaving. "What?" "Come on," he wheezed between laughs. "All that screaming." "You did all that? We didn't realize you were scared of clowns, but we thought if we dressed up and followed you, at least Danny would freak out. And you both screamed so loud whenever we ran up behind you, we never even managed to catch up." Danny stared at him, still white as a sheet. "Clowns?" she whispered. Another guy piped up, grinning. "Yeah, we had masks and everything. We thought you saw us. Honestly, you ran like hell. Never thought we'd lose you in there." My mouth went dry. I shook my head slowly. "You never caught up to us?" Jason laughed again, clapping me on the shoulder. "Not once, man. You two scared yourselves half to death." But my mind replayed the photos on Danny's phone. The coughs. The groan that shook the walls. The sheeted figures turning in unison. If the others had never reached us, never caught up, then who else had been in there with us?
I'd babysat for the Millers a few times before, but never on Halloween. They had 2 kids, Max, 8, and Sophie, 6, both wild little balls of energy at the best of times. Tonight they were bouncing off the walls, dressed in plastic vampire fangs and a fairy costume with glitter still clinging to her cheeks. When I arrived, they were just dumping out their haul from trick-or-treating. Candy spilled across the living room rug like treasure from a pirate's chest. Fun-sized chocolates, lollipops, gummies shaped like eyeballs. Max was already trying to trade 2 lollipops for Sophie's king-size bar, and she was shrieking about fairness. Mr. and Mrs. Miller gave me the usual quick rundown. "Snacks are fine, no more soda after 8. Sophie hates brushing her teeth. Don't let her sneak candy upstairs. Max will try to stay up late watching cartoons. We'll be back after midnight." They were dressed for a grown-up party, she in a witch's hat with sequins, he in a cheap Dracula cape, and kissed the kids goodnight before heading out into the cool October evening. The house was warm and cozy, faintly smelling of pumpkin candles. Paper bats were taped along the stair rail, a glowing skeleton dangled from the ceiling fan, and the front window was lined with fake cobwebs. I let the kids stay up for another half hour, watching an old monster movie while they munched through their candy pile. Every few minutes, Sophie shrieked at the TV, clutching a cushion to her chest, then peeked out giggling. Max pretended not to be scared, but I noticed him inching closer with each shadowy scene. Eventually, I herded them upstairs, teeth brushed with half-hearted groans, costumes swapped for pajamas patterned with pumpkins. I tucked them into bed with their nightlights glowing, promising to check in later. Downstairs, I made myself comfortable on the couch. A bowl of leftover candy sat on the coffee table, and the movie channel was still running its Halloween marathon. The ticking clock on the wall sounded loud in the sudden quiet, but it was a good kind of quiet. For a while, the night passed exactly as you'd expect. Every so often the doorbell rang, and I handed out candy to little clusters of kids in costumes. A pirate with a crooked sword, a tiny witch who whispered her trick or treat so softly I barely heard it, a pair of teenagers who hadn't bothered with costumes at all, just hoodies and pillowcases. The kids were polite enough, eyes darting past me to the glowing bowl by the door, before scurrying off to the next house. Their laughter echoed down the street, mingling with the rustle of leaves and the occasional bark of a dog. Each time, I smiled and shut the door, settling back onto the couch. The candy bowl on the table grew lighter, the monster movie droned on, and I felt almost smug at how easy this job was turning out to be. By 9:30, the steady stream had slowed, then stopped altogether. The street outside had gone quiet. Porch lights clicked off one by one, until only a few faintly glowed through the mist. I stretched out on the couch, letting my eyes drift shut. That was when the knocking started. It was sharp enough to jolt me fully awake. 3 quick knocks at the front door. I sat up, blinking at the clock on the wall. 10 o'clock. Too late for trick-or-treaters. Still, instinct kicked in. I grabbed the candy bowl from the table and patted over, half expecting a straggler who'd gotten turned around on the street. The porch light hummed as I flicked it on. A yellow cone spilled across the step, catching the fog drifting low to the ground. I pulled the door open. And there was nothing. The street stretched out empty in both directions. The last porch lights were dead, their plastic pumpkins unlit. The night air carried nothing but the rustle of leaves tumbling across the pavement, the occasional creak of a branch in the breeze. A prank, I told myself. Some teenager trying for one last laugh before heading home. Knock and run, an old classic. Still, I stepped out onto the porch, peering across the lawn. The fog seemed to thicken as I watched, curling around the fake tombstones the Millers had set out earlier that week. It blurred the whole street into a strange half-world. Shapes distorted, shadows stretched too long. The candy bowl grew heavy in my hand. My skin prickled with the cold. After a minute, I shook myself and went back inside, shutting the door firmly behind me. I slid the lock across, more out of habit than worry, and tried to laugh under my breath. Just a prank. That was all. But the living room felt different when I sat back down. The silence was deeper, heavier, pressing in around me. The monster movie flickered across the screen, but the sound seemed thinner, muffled somehow. I caught myself glancing at the stairs, listening for the steady rhythm of the kids breathing upstairs. They were asleep. Everything was fine. So why did it suddenly feel like the night was waiting? I don't know how much time passed before I heard it. At first I thought it was the TV, the monster movie bleeding into something stranger. But when I muted the sound, the whisper was still there. Trick or treat? So soft I almost doubted it. A child's voice, high and sing-song, floating through the quiet. I turned toward the door, heart giving a nervous kick. The candy bowl sat untouched on the table. The porch light still glowed faintly against the fog. Another whisper, louder this time. Trick or treat? I crept to the window and peeled back the curtain. The yard was empty. No movement, no kids on the step. Just fog crawling along the ground like smoke from a dying fire. My skin prickled. I shut the curtain quickly and pressed my back to the wall, listening. The voice came again, closer. Trick or treat? This time, it wasn't outside. It was inside the house. I spun toward the hallway, throat tight, every nerve screaming that I should run upstairs, check the kids. But I forced myself to move slowly, one step at a time, the old floorboards creaking under my weight. The living room seemed too big, every corner too dark. Shadows pooled like water where the decorations sagged. And through it all, the voice whispered again, right behind me. Trick or treat? I whipped around. Nothing. Just the house. Just the quiet. And the sense that I wasn't alone anymore. I stood in the hallway, pulse thudding in my ears, trying to convince myself it was nothing. The TV, the wind, my imagination running away after that prank knock. That's when I heard it. A thump. Not loud, but heavy. Like something dropping onto the floor in the next room. I crept back toward the living room, every step dragging. The candy bowl still sat on the coffee table where I'd left it. The TV flickered silently, casting pale light across the rug. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Then I noticed the decorations. One of the paper bats strung along the wall was swaying, side to side, though no breeze stirred. Its shadow stretched across the wallpaper, twitching as if it were alive. And underneath the ceiling fan, the plastic skeleton that had dangled all night was slowly turning, its bony arm creaking upward as though reaching for me. I froze. Breath caught in my throat. The whisper came again. Trick or treat. This time, it seemed to drift from the corner of the room itself, where the shadows pooled darkest. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the edge of the rug. The shadows didn't move, didn't shift, but I couldn't shake the feeling they were watching. I fled into the hallway, heart hammering, eyes flicking up the stairs. That's where the next sound came from. A soft creak on the landing above. The unmistakable sound of a footstep. The sound of that creak rooted me to the spot. It hadn't come from the TV, or the decorations, or outside in the street. It had come from directly above me. The landing. The kids' bedrooms. For a moment, I just stood there, listening, waiting for another sound. My mind scrambled for excuses, old floorboards settling, the wind rattling the house. But none of them explained the way it had groaned, weight pressed into it. Someone had stepped there. I forced my legs to move, one slow step at a time up the staircase. The banister was lined with paper bats, their wings brushing against my arm as I climbed. My hand slid on the polished wood, slick with sweat. Halfway up, I paused. The air felt heavier, colder. And then, faint and high, like a child playing, I heard laughter. Not Sophie's giggle, not Max's chuckle. This was different. Too soft. Too wrong. It floated down the hallway, slipping into the cracks between the bedroom doors. My heart hammered as I reached the top. Both kids' doors were shut. The laughter faded, replaced by silence so complete it made my ears ring. I pushed Sophie's door open first. Her nightlight glowed on the dresser, casting little stars across the ceiling. She was fast asleep, arms curled around a stuffed rabbit, breathing slow and steady. Max's room was the same. He was sprawled on his back, mouth open, a smear of chocolate still on his cheek. Sound asleep. Relief surged, shaky and hollow. They were fine, both of them. I turned back toward the hallway and froze. Right behind me, so close I could feel the breath on my neck, came the whisper. Trick or treat. I bolted down the hallway, heart hammering so loud I couldn't hear my own footsteps. Every instinct screamed to grab the kids and run, but when I glanced back, both were still sound asleep in their beds, untouched. So who, or what, had whispered to me? I stumbled down the stairs 2 at a time, almost tripping as I reached the bottom. The living room glowed with the flickering light of the still-muted TV. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Except for the candy bowl. It had been full when I went upstairs, a scatter of chocolates and gummies at the bottom. Now the sweets were gone, every single one. In their place sat something else. A single polished marble. Deep red, veins of black swirling through it, catching the light like a drop of frozen blood. I stared at it, breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. My mind struggled to make sense of it. Maybe Max or Sophie had crept down and swapped it out as a prank. Maybe one of the older kids outside had slipped in while I wasn't looking. But that didn't explain the way the marble pulsed faintly in the glow of the TV, as though something inside it was alive. And then I heard the voice again. From the doorway this time, drifting in with the cold night air through the cracks in the frame. Soft high, almost playful. Trick or treat. I moved through the downstairs with my phone clutched like a weapon, even though the screen was dead. Every window I checked was locked, every curtain drawn, but the house still felt wrong, as if something was pressing at the glass, waiting for me to let it in. The last door was the bathroom. Small, ordinary, the one place I thought I could reassure myself nothing was lurking. I flicked on the light. The mirror above the sink caught it, throwing my pale reflection back at me. My face looked washed out and strange, hair stuck to my temple with sweat. For a second I let out a shaky breath. Just me. Just the bathroom. Then I saw it. Not in front of me. Not in the mirror directly, but in the reflection of the sideboard behind me, next to the door. A figure, small and hunched, like a child folded in on itself. Its head bowed, shoulders sharp, knees drawn up. It wasn't solid. It was made of shadow, its outline soft at the edges like smoke. But I could see it clearly in the mirror, crouched on the wooden surface as if it had been waiting. My heart hammered so hard I felt it in my throat. I spun, eyes locking on the sideboard. Empty. Just a folded towel, a box of tissues, the normal clutter of the room. When I turned back, the shadow in the mirror was gone. The light buzzed overhead, too bright and too harsh, and my reflection looked wrong again. Frightened, cornered. I forced myself to flick the switch off and step back into the hallway, but the certainty lingered like static in the air. I hadn't been alone in that room. The kitchen was the heart of the house, and it felt like the darkest place of all. The overhead bulb glowed faintly, buzzing as if it might burn out. The refrigerator gave a long, low groan. Every shadow seemed to reach just a little too far across the tiles. The candy bowl sat on the table, empty now. And the marble, it wasn't in the living room anymore. It was on the kitchen worktop, waiting. I stepped closer. My hand shook as I reached out, but before I touched it, the marble rolled, smooth and deliberate. A small arc across the table, stopping near the edge like it was choosing where to go next. Behind me, a cupboard rattled. Then another. The handles clinked softly, like someone tugging them with careful fingers. The whisper rose again. Trick or treat. It came from the pantry, from under the table, from everywhere at once. The biscuit tin slid off the counter, spinning once before stopping at the sink. The bulb overhead flickered, buzzed, then flared so bright it hurt my eyes. The marble rolled again, this time toward the back door. I lunged, trying to snatch it up, desperate to end this strange game. But my fingers closed on nothing. The marble slid away like water, vanishing between my hands. The light snapped off. The kitchen plunged into a darkness that pressed against me like a weight. And from the hallway, from the stairwell, from upstairs where the kids slept, the whisper returned. Louder, sharper. Trick or treat. The whisper spread through the house like smoke. Trick or treat. It echoed from the kitchen walls, the hall, the stairwell. A chorus of voices, high and low, overlapping until it felt like the house itself was speaking. I stumbled into the hallway, my only thought the kids. Get them, get out now. The stairs creaked under my weight as I climbed. The whisper rose with me, filling every step. At the top, shadows seemed to shiver across the landing like water rippling in a pan. Max and Sophie were still asleep. Somehow, their faces were calm, their breaths even, as if nothing touched them. I shook Max's shoulder, whispered his name. His eyes fluttered open, dazed and confused. Sophie stirred when I scooped her up, clinging to my neck without a word. Quiet, I hissed. We have to go. Right now, the whisper followed us into the hallway. Closer, clearer. Trick or treat. I carried Sophie, dragging Max by the hand as we hurried down the stairs. The air grew colder, thicker with each step. The marble was waiting at the bottom, gleaming in the glow of the porch light through the door's frosted glass. As my foot hit the last step, it rolled, not away this time, but toward me. A perfect red circle spinning across the tiles, stopping at my toes like an offering. I kicked it hard. It clattered into the shadows, and the chorus shrieked in unison, sharp enough to make Sophie whimper in my arms. I fumbled the lock, yanked the door open. Cold night air rushed in, slicing through the heat of the house. For the briefest second, I thought I saw figures standing in the fog outside, small, child-sized shapes waiting at the end of the drive. I didn't wait to find out. We ran. Out into the street, past the pumpkins grinning from porches, past the fallen leaves that skittered like footsteps at our heels. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The whispers followed anyway, thin and high, threading through the night air. Trick or treat. I didn't stop running until I saw the porch light 2 doors down. The Thompsons, an older couple who never turned kids away on Halloween. Their carved pumpkins still burned faintly on the steps. I hammered at the door until my knuckles hurt. When it finally opened, Mr. Thompson stood there in his robe, blinking in confusion as I stumbled inside with Sophie clinging to me and Max crying at my side. I tried to explain. The voices, the marble, the whisper that followed us into the street. But the words tumbled out half-mad, broken by gasps of breath. The Thompsons didn't understand. They just sat us down, brought blankets, called the Millers. By the time the Millers arrived, I was shaking too hard to speak. They thanked the Thompsons, bundled up the kids, and tried to smile at me. Just a scare, they said. Just Halloween nerves. But they didn't see what I saw as we left. On the Thompsons' porch, where my feet had hammered against the wood, sat a single red marble. Waiting. I told myself it was over. That once I left the Millers' house behind, the voices would stay there too. I was wrong. Every Halloween since, no matter where I've been, home, at a friend's, even once in a different city, I hear it again. Always sometime after dark. Always when I'm alone. A knock on the door, a faint rustle across the floorboards, and then in that same high sing-song voice. Trick or treat. Sometimes it leaves a marble, on a windowsill, on the edge of my bed, on the seat of my car. Always red. Always gleaming like a drop of frozen blood. The Millers still don't believe me. No one does. But I know it's only a matter of time. 1 year the voices won't stop at knocking. 1 year they'll finally come inside.
The stories end, but the echoes stay. They always do. Circling back through the wires, the whispers, the dark corners of memory. If you've heard something tonight that followed you past the telling, don't worry. It just means the archive has found room for one more voice.